The mid-1980s was the perfect storm for action arcade games. Right smack in the middle of the Cold War, not only did we have guns a-blazing on the big screen, but also in arcades all across the world. Konami released a series of military-themed games, including Jackal, Boot Camp, Contra, and the game we are taking an in-depth look at today, Green Beret. Why was the name changed when it was released in North America? So grab your knife and let's take care of the bad guys, because this is the history of Green Beret. The year is 1985, and the higher-ups at Konami had noticed a trend among moviegoers. Thanks in part to the ongoing conflict with the Soviet Union, people were loving action movies where a one-man army would take on hordes of soldiers and oftentimes come out the victor. Movies such as Commando, First Blood, and Missing in Action all became huge hits, and Konami thought that a series of military-themed games would be great sellers not just in the USA, but all over the world. The first game in the series was Green Beret, but Konami did not want the main character to use a machine gun as his primary weapon. They opted instead for a knife and the occasional pickups of more powerful weapons for a brief period of time. The game was released all across the world as Green Beret, except in the United States, where the title was changed to Russian Attack to appeal to Americans' disdain for the Russians. They would continue this with their other military-themed games, such as Jackal becoming Top Gunner thanks to the Tom Cruise hit movie, and finally Combat School becoming Boot Camp. Green Beret was released in 1985 by Konami. This is a run-and-gun game which takes place across 4 stages. You are a soldier sent to rescue POWs who are going to be executed by a firing squad. The game opens up with a brief cutscene telling you to rescue the hostages while showing the POWs. After that, it's off to the races because the enemies are relentless. You have a knife button and a weapon button to be used when you pick up a secondary weapon. You can jump in the game, but you have to push up on the joystick to do so. As you make your way to the right, the enemies increase in numbers. You also have to watch out for mines on the ground, as well as paratroopers dropping in and shooting at you from above. By killing certain enemies, power-ups will be dropped, such as a flamethrower which has 3 shots, a bazooka which has 4 shots, and a 3-pack of grenades. If you take too long on a level, more difficult enemies will be dispatched, and finally, a stealth bomber will be sent to take you out. At the end of each stage is a unique boss. The Stage 1 boss is just a number of soldiers dispatched from the back of a truck. The Stage 2 boss is a pack of rabid dogs. The Stage 3 boss are shooting auto gyros. And finally, the Stage 4 boss is a multi-shot flamethrower. After you defeat the final boss, you untie the POWs and they salute you with a congratulatory message. After this, the game repeats at a higher difficulty. In 1989, Konami released MIA, Missing in Action, in the arcades. This was the spiritual successor to Green Beret, but honestly it feels more like a remake to me. Instead of the Cold War setting, this is clearly meant to be Vietnam. This time around, the game supports 2 players simultaneously, with Player 1 taking on the role of the unnamed Green Beret sent to rescue the POWs, while Player 2 takes on the role of a soldier sent from the United Nations. Your primary weapon is a knife, but you can always pick up secondary weapons such as a flamethrower, bazookas, grenades, and finally an assault rifle with limited ammunition. It is possible to carry more than one weapon this time around, and able to switch between them at any time. If you thought the enemy count was bad in Green Beret, there are twice as many this time around. Konami was nice enough to give us checkpoints, so that does make the game just a little bit easier. Instead of just scrolling to the right, you'll find yourself having to traverse to the left on certain stages, and climbing ladders, meaning vertical scrolling, is included as well. On level 5, you have to rescue the POWs and then escort them to the waiting helicopter. The tricky part is, the POWs can be shot and killed in a short amount of time. If all of the POWs are killed, the game is over. If you were successful in rescuing them, they are boarded on the helicopter and you are given a congratulatory speech. In 2011, the very first official sequel titled Russian Attack Expatriate was released on Xbox Live and the PlayStation Network. The game takes place 15 years after the Cold War, in which you take on the role of Sergeant Sid Morrow as you attempt to rescue a member of your original team, Rory Gibson. The game is played from a 2.5D perspective, and once again your primary weapon is a knife. But you can also pick up rocket launchers, grenades, and rifles. You do have different play mechanics such as a stealth mode, which is similar to Metal Gear Solid, attack combos, night vision goggles, and gas masks. Across the 3 stages, there are various times that you will have to use stealth in order to advance. Be careful though, because if you make too much noise, it will set off alarms. A welcome addition this time around is a health bar, in which you will need because the enemies are attacking similar to my wife at a $3 buffet. As you progress further and further into the game, new combos are unlocked which allow for greater point bonuses. Reviews were not that kind when this game was released, but I enjoyed it, so if you are a fan of Russian Attack, you might want to check it out. As far as the conversions of the original arcade game goes, Imagine Software had the honors, and some of these turned out pretty good. The BBC Micro version is up first in all of its neon-colored glory. Seriously now, they couldn't have come up with a better color scheme than this? I understand limitations on machines, but wouldn't the color red or brown be just a little bit better? I would rather look at the color of a turd than this neon mess. Getting past the colors, the screen uses a flick screen scrolling method unlike the smooth version found in the arcade. However, the game is fast and the animation is fairly smooth. Not a great conversion by any means, but it certainly is not the worst one either. The Commodore Plus 4 version is up next, and I wish it would crawl back under the rock in which it came from. And here you all thought that the BBC Micro version was the worst one. This seriously looks like it was written in BASIC with graphical glitches all throughout. There is only one sound in the game, and that is when you use your weapon. The screen uses the same flick screen scrolling that was found in the BBC Micro version. Rumor has it that this was Tiertex's first game, which would explain a lot. The game sort of resembles the arcade game, but that's after you've had 5 shots of vodka. I've said this before and I'll say it again. At least this game is fast, but so is my diarrhea. The Atari 800 version is up next, and boy oh boy, what do we have here? Your character appears to have 2 frames of animation and only 1 color. Your jumping ability makes it look like you are on the moon. The enemy soldiers appear to have stopped for a hit at the local crack house because they appear to be twice as fast as you. The backgrounds are nice, and honestly, that's about it. We do get some nice smooth scrolling, but the playability is just terrible. The enemies appear way too fast, giving you little time to react. I would avoid this at all costs. If you love herky-jerky scrolling with subpar animation, then the MSX version is right up your alley. This looks absolutely like a Spectrum port, but surprise, surprise, it's not. It's just a bad version of a classic arcade game. Single color sprites and slow, uninspiring gameplay makes this one of the worst ports of Green Beret. The animation is laughable, with the characters seeming to glide along the ground. There are a few sound effects here and there, but nothing to get excited about. The MS-DOS version is really well done despite only having 4-color CGA graphics. The entire arcade presentation is here, from the opening to the intermissions to the ending. The sprites are very detailed and look really close to the arcade original. The thing that lets it down is the slow and jerky scrolling. It's nowhere near as bad as the MSX version, but something is just a bit off. Since this is an early DOS game, the only sound support is the internal PC speaker, which, by the way, sounds terrible. The sound effects and music at the end of level 1 were literally hurting my ears. The playability, though, is very good with nice responsive controls. And now we have possibly the best 8-bit home computer conversion, which is the Commodore 64 version. The entire presentation from the arcade is included, but this time we get excellent music and sound effects. Although the graphics are just a tad bit blocky and not as detailed as the MS-DOS version, they are animated nicely with smooth scrolling all throughout. The controls are nice and tight, although you do have to press the spacebar to fire your secondary weapon. The difficulty is pretty high in this version, but all in all, it's an excellent conversion. If you were to look at still shots of the Amstrad version, you might think this would be the best home conversion. After watching this game run for just a few seconds, you will realize how wrong you were. While the colors are nice and the sprites are fairly detailed, the flick screen scrolling is just absolutely horrendous. It's possible for your character to get to the right of the screen and have to wait for the screen to finish scrolling. The speed of the game is about 75% of the original, which greatly hurts the playability. For some reason, the levels seem twice as long as in the arcade game. There is a decent little tune playing in the background, which always helps, but unfortunately, it doesn't help enough. Up next is the Spectrum version. First off, let's talk about the monochrome elephant in the room. Yes, the colors are severely limited and color clash has been kept to a minimum, but it looks really good, especially for a Spectrum game. According to David Collier, who was the original programmer on this game, Imagine Software gave them a deadline of 6 weeks to get this completed from start to finish. What they were able to accomplish in that short amount of time was phenomenal, since essentially everything from the arcade game is included, except for music. Mr. Collier wanted to include music, but he said literally every byte of memory was taken. The speed of the game is fast and the scrolling is nice and smooth. A really good conversion on the humble Spectrum computer. The version most players are familiar with is the NES version. This takes the original arcade game and expands upon it by adding simultaneous two-player action, extra levels, and a different plot. Not only do you get a brand new opening scene, but you also get a brand new ending as well. Instead of rescuing POWs, your mission is to destroy the enemy's secret weapon. The graphics are very detailed and are close representations of the arcade game. The speed of the game is on par with the original and the gameplay feels just right. Along with the sound effects and music, this is probably the best home conversion. In 2002, the Game Boy Advance received a compilation of games titled Konami's Collector Series Arcade Advance. This featured 6 arcade games, one of which was Green Beret. This version is extremely close to the arcade game with a few extras thrown in. If you input the Konami code, it unlocks the 2 extra stages from the NES version. There is also a simultaneous 2-player mode via link cable. Finally, the controls have been changed, so instead of pushing up to jump, you just have to press the A button. Overall, it's a really good remake of the arcade original. In 2007, for the Nintendo DS, Konami Classic Series Arcade Hits was released. Similar to the Game Boy Advance compilation, this one included the original untouched arcade version without any extras added to the gameplay. It does include scans of the instruction card and leaflets along with tips and tricks for the game. This version is really well done and again is extremely close to the arcade original. Speaking of the original arcade game, it was released on the Xbox Live network in 2007. This is running under emulation, so what you are playing is essentially the arcade game. There is an optional mode which improves the graphics and gives you a remixed soundtrack. Although I'm an arcade purist, I really did enjoy the enhanced port of this game. And that takes care of the history of Green Beret. I've always enjoyed this game from the first time I played it at our local bowling alley back in 1985. The graphics and sound drew me in, and the playability kept me coming back for more. The game is just a little bit too short with only 4 stages, but what it does extremely well. If you've never had a chance to try this game out, give it a shot. You'll be glad you did. If you enjoyed this video and want to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. Also, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my content. It's the only way my channel can grow. Thank you so much for watching.